Hello, welcome to Bible Study Hub. My name is Anne, and I am hosting alone tonight. My daughter Noelle is speaking at a conference in Las Vegas, of all places, so she won't be able to join us tonight. But I'm so glad that you're here, whether you're here via Facebook or whether you're here via YouTube or maybe some other place that this happens to get posted. Welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you. So we have been in Daniel chapter 5. We are tonight getting into Daniel chapter 6. So let me give you a little review here so that we kind of get a running start on this amazing book of Daniel. So chapter 5 review. So by the time we hit chapter 5, Daniel himself is about 80 years old. So we have a lot of time that passed between chapter 4 and chapter 5. King Bel-Chazar in chapter 5, which Noelle, I thought, brilliantly dubbed the frat boy king. If you didn't hear the study, that tells you everything you need to know about King Bel-Chazar. He's having a wild night party while his kingdom is under attack. So his dad has already been defeated. He's not worried about a thing because he thinks he's fortified enough as the city that nobody can get through. So rather than having any sense at all, any modicum of decency, he not only has this horrible party with drunkenness. It's a big orgy going on. This is chapter 5 that we did last week. But he says, hey, remember that temple that we ransacked when we brought the Jews over from Jerusalem? Go get all the vessels from that temple and let's use them and desecrate them. And so they bump it up a notch of desecration by taking the holy vessels from God's temple and incorporating them into their drunken orgy and then worshiping all these idols on top of it. While this is going on, this disembodied hand appears and writes 4 words on the wall and then disappears. Well, this scares the king out of his mind, as you can imagine. And nobody can tell him what these words mean. They're Aramaic words. I mean, the words themselves, they understand. It just doesn't make any sense to them. So finally, the queen mother comes in and she says, listen, I just remember this guy from a long time ago named Daniel, and he could interpret dreams and stuff. So he's probably the person you want to bring in. So King Bel-Chazar, the frat boy king, brings Daniel, this older man now, brings him in and says, can you interpret this? And if you can, I'm going to give you a gold chain around your neck. I'm going to put a purple robe on you, and you can be, wait for it, number 3 in the kingdom. See, he's number 2 in the kingdom, so he can't offer the number 2 spot because his dad was the first. So he's like, I'll give you number 3, as if this is a real draw. Daniel, it doesn't say he rolled his eyes. It doesn't say that. But I'm just thinking maybe he did. So Daniel says, you can keep your robe. You can give the awards to somebody else. I don't want them, but I will interpret the handwriting for you. So basically he says, look, king, it says that you've been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom is divided between the Medes and the Persians, and you're done. And so tone deaf, King Bel-Chazar says, well, give him the purple robe and put the chain around his neck. Hey, you're number 3 in the kingdom. And you can just see Daniel standing there like, did you not hear what I just said? Like, why would you be doing this? You're going down. It's over. So I don't want your stuff. It doesn't mean anything. It's utterly meaningless. And that very night, King Bel-Chazar is conquered. He dies. And if you missed that Bible study, you should listen to it from last week, because it's amazing how the Medo-Persian army gets into this fortified city of Babylon. I won't cover it tonight because we did that last week, but it's really something. All right, so chapter 6 begins with the rule of the Medes and the Persians under a king named Cyrus. So this is the ruler who conquered Babylon. His father was Persian. His mother was a Mede, so he was kind of a mixture of both. He will play a massive role in the future when Israel is commissioned the Jews go back to the homeland, to Jerusalem, to rebuild their temple after 70 years of exile. So we open chapter 6 with a man named King Darius. So the question is, of course, well, I thought Cyrus was king, so who is this Darius guy? We're actually not 100% sure who this Darius guy is. So a couple of options for you. I'll just do this really quickly. Number 1, it is not uncommon in biblical times for kings to change their names when they ascend to the throne. This makes it really interesting for historians because they're known as one person, and then all of a sudden a complete name change, and you have to somehow piece together that was the same person. So we think it's possible that Darius was more of a title, like Herod, like Caesar, where it wasn't the person's name exactly, it was more like a title for them, and that Darius was actually Cyrus. Things historically kind of line up for that to be the case if you take a look at some of the details. It's also possible that Darius was a different person. He was under King Cyrus, and I think that's extremely likely as well. So we don't know. I guess it doesn't matter that much, but I just thought you would like to know what the possibilities are for this Darius guy. So Babylon has been defeated. That was the head of gold in the statue that we did back in the beginning of Daniel. The chest and arms of silver, Medo-Persia just took over. It's all part of God's plan. It's all going to be used for his glory. So let's start reading in Daniel chapter 6 now. And we're going to read verses 1 through 3 together. So here we go. Daniel 6, 1 through 3. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. And over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. All right, so the king Darius decides he's got to organize this kingdom fast. He's got to do something. Now, satrap isn't a word that we typically use. At least I don't use it much. So I had to kind of look up at what's a satrap? What does that look like? So we don't really have this, but I guess the closest thing we can think of would be something like a governor for us. So here's what they would do. They controlled the military in their specific district. So they were in charge of all the soldiers. They had their own courts that they would preside over. So they would have other people in charge of being judges and things, but they kind of oversaw the court system. They oversaw any governmental figures under them because they were pretty high up. But here's the thing you want to keep in mind. They were in charge of collecting taxes. We're going to get back to that in just a moment. So in order to manage these 120 satraps or governors, he sets over them 3 top officials. And Daniel is one of those officials. In Daniel 6:2, again, it says, Daniel was one to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might not suffer loss. So what does that mean? Well, they're in charge of collecting taxes. And as such, they can skim some off the top. They can filter some. They can launder some money going on. So in order that none of that goes on, this king has to quickly identify 3 really trustworthy, high-capacity leaders that have been trusted for a long time throughout that region. And he puts those guys, Daniel's one of them, in charge of all those 120 guys to make sure that the taxes go where the taxes are supposed to go, which is over to Darius. So Daniel has a very significant leadership role here. I want to ask you a question. How'd that happen? This just all came about. Daniel's in his 80s. So start typing if you're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. I want to hear from you. We're going to read some of your comments. How do you think that Daniel came with this so quickly? Here, he's already been taken hostage years and years and years ago, 65 years ago. He has served faithfully in the kingdom. And then we don't quite know what he was doing during the Bel-Chazar small saga that went on, other than being called in by the end. Bel-Chazar didn't seem to really know about him very much. So we're not totally sure what was happening with that. But somehow, some way, Daniel is picked to be one of the 3 top officials in all of this newly conquered territory. So how did he do that? How did he rise to level so quickly? All right. Somebody is saying he was a man of integrity, a man of principle. And so he was trusted. So what you're saying is that, yeah, this goes to his reputation that preceded him, apparently. Somebody says he had the trust of the Romans, who may not have wanted to admit it. Excellent point. This was actually the Medo-Persians, and I think that's what you meant to say there. You're like me. I'm still in the book of Luke and Acts. I'm all Romans over there, but that's what you meant to say. So yeah, that's very, very possible. Had the trust. Susie says, past history of his service to the kingdom, and that he could not be bribed. Oh, I really like that. He would not be bribed for any services. Terry says his integrity and faithfulness to doing good brought rewards and trust. Excellent. Somebody says, God put him there. Oh, very insightful. Someone else says they knew he was close to a God, and so they wanted to keep him in good graces. Okay, so he had proven that he had special power from some deity out there. They might not have known what it was. Kimberly says, proved his honesty earlier, and also God's provision. Someone else is saying, because of his interpreting the dreams and writings correctly every time. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, she said, yeah, I meant to say the Medo-Persians. I totally get it. And then someone else says he had a connection to God. Okay, all as usual. Excellent, excellent comments here. Love every one of them. All right, so let's go on to verses 4 and 5. Here we go. All right, let's read this together. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful and no error or fault was found within him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Okay. Now we have a situation. Don't miss this. They're done with Daniel. They're done. Now, remember, he was in charge of, amongst other things, I'm sure, making sure that the king's tax money goes to the king. And so here comes Daniel. He makes sure that happens. And they're going, there's no way out here. Like if we had someone else overseeing, we could bribe, we could wheel and deal, we could go around, we could threaten, whatever we needed to do what we want. This guy, we can't get around him. He absolutely will not back down. So there's only one way for us to get what we want, and that is to get rid of him. But doggone it, I can't find anything wrong with this man. I'm sure they looked. Maybe he cooked some books. No, he's squeaky clean. Maybe he said something against the king. No, he only says good things about the king. There's nothing that we can find. So all they can think of is, if there's one way that we're going to do this, it's just going to have to be, we're going to have to go after Daniel according to his own faith. So here they go. Daniel 6:6-9. The story gets really good here. So then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." We'll talk about that in a minute. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the injunction. Okay, so here's the situation. Darius gets to be God for a month. Now, to us, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Really? God for a month? Like, what is the point of something like that? But it actually makes a lot of sense if you kind of understand ancient culture. Remember Pharaoh way back in the book of Exodus? Yeah, the pharaohs thought they were gods. I mean, they really did. They thought they were gods. I don't know how any person thinks this. Later, we just got out of the book of Acts, Caesar thought he was a god, and he was regarded as a little g god. So it's not unusual for a king, a ruler, to perceive himself as a god. Many, many of them did this. So this isn't so much like, surprise, you're a god. I mean, he probably already kind of considers himself that. It's kind of more of the like, you know how you can get like coffee of the month, or like, you get a box with like spa stuff in it every month. Okay, this is like king for a month. Like, you're the featured god. You're not the only one. They were polytheists, so they believed in loads of different small g gods. It's just that we're going to feature you for a month. You're going to be like God of the month. So what's going to happen is for a month, we're not going to have anybody else be worshiped, just you. Now, the law of the Medes and the Persians. You might have been like, there's a big deal being made about it, can't be revoked. This is so interesting. They literally had a law amongst themselves that if a king or anybody else made a law, it could not be retracted. So it's this bad. So if somebody were found guilty and the king says, it's capital, you're going to be executed by sundown, and then say at 2 p.m. they find out for sure that this person did not commit the crime, guess what? They have to be executed because the king said it would happen. Even if they know 100% for sure that the person is totally innocent, that person has to be executed. They cannot, by their own law, roll back or nix any law that they made. This was, yeah, somebody's putting a sad face up there. Don't blame you on that. That's terribly sad. It's horrible. And it was what led in part to their downfall, because you cannot operate in that. Let's talk for a second too about this whole lion's den thing. The lion's den is usually pictured, if you've ever done like Sunday school, and this is such a common story that a lot of children learn growing up in church, if you did that, or maybe you taught it in Sunday school. You always have like Daniel in a cave and these, like 4 or 5 lions around. This is in the Middle East. There really aren't caves. It's like a lot of sand. So we don't think it was a cave situation. Plus, lions would die in a cave. They just can't live in that situation. So here's what we think. We think that they literally took bricks and built a den for this very purpose. And then they held the lions in more of a pen outside so that they wouldn't die from being inside. And then on the days that they were going to execute somebody by throwing them to the lions, they wouldn't feed the lions like all day. So by the time they put the lions, they like ramrod them into whatever this pen is and put the thing on the door, and then they drop the person in from up high, presumably so the people who get the lions into that pen aren't also eaten, trying to, shove the person in the door. You drop them in from up high. Those lions would be so ravenous that the person would just be toast. I mean, there's just no way that they're going to survive. So that's what we've got going on. Let's look at verse 10 for a minute. It says, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had his windows and his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. There's something else going on here that's really interesting. And that is this. I'm gonna just put up, you can read this on your own if you want to. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. But back before Daniel, before the exile, there was a decree that went out. I believe this was when King Solomon was dedicating the temple, that basically the synopsis of those verses is this. If Israel sins, they follow other gods, and they're carried away to exile. So that's what happened. If they, 1, repent, 2, plead with God to restore them to their land, 3, pray toward their land, 4, they will be restored and forgiven, possibly, if God is gracious. So I kind of bolded in my notes, pray toward their land. Did you catch that? He gets down on his knees and he prays. Let me go back to that. Let's see. Yeah. In his upper chamber, open toward what? Toward Jerusalem. So here's a question. I want you to answer this for me. This is really, really important. Did Daniel have to pray in his window? Start commenting if you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. I want to hear from you. Is this something that Daniel was required to do, to pray in his window? Because this is what he does, right? He goes upstairs after the edict has been signed. He understands it. He's a very, very smart person, obviously, very discerning. He knows exactly what has gone on. He knows exactly what will happen to him if he doesn't fall in line with this. And he goes right to his window where he always did it, and he prays. I have to put this up. Hi, Nibbles. Yes, my cat is very vocal and she likes to participate. So Nibbles, what do you think? Did Daniel have to pray in his window, or was this something that he actually, he didn't have to? Here, somebody says, he did not have to. He did it to be seen. Sort of a last in your face move. I like that. And I think you're very insightful there that he didn't pray in his window because he was too stupid to know better. He did it because he wanted to be seen. But you're saying, actually, no, he didn't have to. Okay, I'm curious to hear from other people. Keep commenting here because you always have such great things to say. Your question answering is one of my absolute favorite parts of our study. Somebody else says, not necessarily, but it's something he always did and he wasn't going to be intimidated. Oh, I like that. To not have done as he always did would have showed him as a compromiser. Boy, that's good. Somebody says, no, he only has to pray. But his choice to do it shows he was not going to bow down to what was signed. Very good. Kim says, I think he was having an open show of obedience to his God, not going to be backed down by pressure from men. Somebody else is saying it was his custom to pray this way. Yes, absolutely it was. Terry says he was strong in his faith and not ashamed of showing his faith. And he wanted others to observe and maybe feel the truth in their hearts, that they would look at that and be like, wow, this guy is for real. Like this God must be for real. Very insightful. Kathy said he didn't want to be a hypocrite and hide to please men and save himself. All right. I love all of your comments. I think all of those are extremely insightful. Let me take this off for the moment. And here's what I also love. If you read any commentaries on this, you're probably going to read people who say this was an issue of obedience. But what you all just did so brilliantly was you debunked that. This was actually not an issue of obedience, was it? Because God said you have to pray toward Jerusalem, but it never says anything in the entire Bible about having to pray in a window. That's just not in there. That's not in the text. It's not in the law. It's nowhere in the Old Testament that he would have to pray in a window. So what you rightly identified is this isn't so much an issue of obedience. This goes beyond it. Like it doesn't fall short of obedience. It goes beyond obedience. And this is where I want to camp out with you for just a minute, because this just convicted the socks off of me when I finally started to kind of put this all together in my mind. There's one thing to say, I will be obedient to God. And I am not minimizing that. It's hard to be obedient. It's valuable to be obedient. God expects obedience. God blesses obedience. It's one way we show that we love God is to be obedient. So obedience is huge. But once in a while, you go beyond obedience to, I don't know what to call it, loyalty, maybe? Something that says, I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because that's the level of love I have for God. That's the level of dedication I have to God. And this is how I want to handle it. When Daniel goes into that window and he prays, he knows he's going to die. Look, I think he knew it was a setup, don't you? Again, he's not stupid. He knows that these are the people he's keeping down all the time. They're trying to bribe him. I'm just making this up, but assuming they're trying to bribe him or threaten him or intimidate him or beg him or whatever, they're coming back and he is just, no, he's not going to let anything happen. He's operating with 100% integrity all the time. Of course, he's going to be a target. And Daniel says, I don't care. I don't care. So my thought was, okay, how does that apply to my life? How do I take that level of dedication and then say, okay, Anne, and I would ask you to put your name in there. How do I do what Daniel did? And I guess one of the things that crossed my mind was, how many times do we kind of change who we are based on the company in our presence? So just as an example, do you talk and do you act the very same way in a church group setting as a home family setting, as a secular work setting, as standing in line at the grocery store setting. All those different settings with all those different kinds of people. Are you exactly the same person? Is the speech that comes out of your mouth exactly the same no matter where you are? I will tell you, super convicting. Or do we change? Do we use some, we'll call it spicy language with the coworkers? Because, we want to be accepted, and we come across like too religious, they won't like us. But then when we go to church, we would never use those words. We would never use that language. We use a completely different set of more holy words, a different tone. And then we get home with our family and we're not very nice to them. And we treat them with less grace than we would ever treat anyone else. That's like the normal thing that we tend to do if we're not working on it. That is the opposite of what Daniel did. He was just like, I am the same person at work as I am at home, as I am in front of the king, as I am with my coworkers and the people under me and in my bedroom and before my God, because it's all before my God. There is a little saying that I have adopted for my own life for a long, long time, and I'll share it with you in case you're like, yep, I'm going to adopt that too. And that is this: Jesus isn't first in my life. He is my life. Big difference. When Jesus is first in my life, that means I have a whole lot of other priorities, and hopefully I'll, push him up to the number 1 slot, but sometimes he falls down to the number 4 or 5 or 10 or 20. That's not how you want to live your life. First of all, it's too hard. But when Jesus is your life, then it necessarily means that you're going to be the same person in the grocery store as you are at home, as you are at church, as you are at work, as you are at the ball game. You're the same person because all of that is for Jesus. He is the only one that you really answer to, right? And it affects everything that we do. That is Daniel. Lived a life of complete and total loyalty to God. All right, well, let's go on. Hopefully that will stick with you. That's one that's like, worth the price of admission for me. All right, Daniel 6:11-13. Let's read on here. So it says, then these men came by agreement and found Daniel. What? They found him. I wonder how that happened. Making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, oh, you can hear the drama. Oh, king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, okay, shall be cast into the den of lions? You have to imagine right now the king's like, I feel like I smell a rat. Why are you bringing this to me? Yeah. So he's like, okay. The king answered and said, yeah, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is not one of your top 3. Notice how they frame him. Daniel, who is one of the, exiles from Judah. Okay, I'm inserting the gagging noises, but I'm pretty sure they were in there. One of the exiles from Judah pays no attention to you, king, or the injunction that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Oh boy. All right. Well, we said probably Daniel is well aware of what's going on, right? These men are shameless. Didn't you sign an injunction? I'm sorry, king. We're trying so hard to figure this out. There's this guy, he's just an exile. Oh yeah, right. He's one of your guys too, but he's just a Jew, and he pays absolutely no attention to what you say. Oh, it pains us to bring this to you, but looks like we're, gonna feed the lions tonight is what this is looking like. Oh man, doesn't it just make you mad? All right, verses 14-15. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king. They keep coming by agreement, so they're all in cahoots, and said to the king, know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Oh boy, we've got a problem now. It's a major problem, and the king knows it. He knows exactly, like all of a sudden it's like the floodlights go on in his mind. Oh my word, I've been had. This is a setup. They don't like this guy who I love, who I depend on, who I need desperately, who I can trust like I can't trust anybody else in my whole kingdom. Like, this is my favorite guy in the whole kingdom. And they just set him up to take him out. So the king, in his mind, he's like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to get him out of this lion den situation. And he didn't have long to get this done, because it was also a law of the Medes and the Persians that if you were executed, it had to happen on the day that you were condemned. So they've just brought the condemnation. They have all these witnesses. By sundown, Daniel has to be thrown into the lion's den, and the king is utterly frantic. He has only until evening, and he can't do it. He can't do it. Verses 16 to 18. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. So he was dropped down in there. The king declared to Daniel, this is just so heartbreaking. May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the den. That's when they would have put the lions in. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing may be changed concerning Daniel. We'll talk about that signet ring in just a second. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Remember, this is an old man by this point. He's up in his 80s. And here they're throwing him into this den of lions. This is just wow. I mean, wow. This is kind of like, how bad can you possibly get, right? To do this to him. This is also very interesting. As he's saying, Daniel, may your God deliver you. I'm sorry, who is God of the month here? Oh, yeah, that was Darius. How impotent are you as a God? How utterly powerless are you as a God? He wanted to save Daniel. He tried every avenue he could think of, and he could not undo his own orders. That's how powerless he was. Don't you just love God's sense of humor? I just think we miss a lot of it in scripture, where God is like, oh, you think you're a God, do you? All right, we'll see if you can do this itty bitty teeny tiny little thing like reversing your edict. You can't even do that. And you call yourself a God? What is wrong with you? You're not a God. And so he's utterly impotent to help. And yet he says to Daniel, I hope your God can do it. As a God, small g, I can't do a thing for you. But the God that you serve, maybe he can do something to save you. And then he seals this wax with his signet ring. So this is how, if you remember even the story of Jesus's crucifixion and how they rolled the tomb shut with a stone, and then they put the seal on it so that nobody could bust in there without breaking the seal. And if you break the seal, you die too. So that's not something that they want to have happen. So this is what they do. They get the hot wax. The king and his lords take their signet ring. They kind of press it into that soft wax, let it harden. And that means you're not getting in and nobody's getting out. So he has a terrible night. He can't sleep. He wants to. Sleep fled from him. That means he was trying probably just to put himself out of his own misery. Like, if I could just go to sleep, I don't have to think about this. He can't eat. He doesn't want music. He doesn't want entertainment. This was a typical evening. He'd have a lot of food. He'd have musicians. He'd have, whatever, a magic show. I don't know what they had, but they'd have entertainment for him. He can't do it. He can't eat. He can't sleep. He can't think about anything. He is beside himself. And you have to also wonder if he believed in Daniel's God. Like, he doesn't know exactly how powerful Daniel's God is, but what are the chances that Daniel's God's going to be really mad at King Darius? Like, he's got to be concerned, right? I think so. All right, let's read verses 19 to 20. Then at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste. He runs to the den of the lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to deliver you from the lions?" I think it's interesting that he doesn't say, "Oh, Daniel, did your God deliver you?" He says, "Could your God do it?" He still doesn't have a great grasp on who Daniel's God is, does he? Could he? Could he? Oh, yeah, he can. And by the way, he's just about to. If by chance this is the same man as Cyrus that we said at the beginning, and even if it's not, if he was known by Cyrus, and I have to assume absolutely he was, don't you think maybe this kind of factored into Cyrus's decision to like go rebuild your temple later on, go back to your homeland, rebuild your temple to this God? It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Well, let's read verses 21 to 22. There we are. Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they haven't harmed me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." We said back with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that the angel of the Lord, the angel that showed up in the fiery furnace, we said it's possible, we gave you a big word, that this is a Christophany, which is just a way of saying Jesus appears in the Old Testament from time to time as some kind of angelic being. They just didn't know. They didn't know what to do with this. It's before he was ever born, so they didn't know his name was Jesus because he hadn't been named by the angel yet. But he would show up from time to time in kind of a pre-incarnate sense. We think it's very possible, highly possible, that that's what happened here. But maybe it was just an angel. Not like just an angel, but it wasn't necessarily Jesus. Maybe it was an angel that was in there. However it was, an angel came in and shut the mouths of the lion. I think it's very interesting to see how God accomplishes what he wanted to do here. He could have come in and had the angel or himself killed the lions. And then the morning, Daniel's in there and all the lions are dead. Dead lions can't eat you. That would have been a good way to keep it, right, from happening. He also could have done sort of pulled a Peter in prison thing where all of a sudden there's an earthquake or something and the rock is rolled away and Daniel just walks out. Or maybe it's more like Philip the evangelist that we talked about in Acts, where God just simply like poof, he moves him from place to place, and all of a sudden Daniel poof, he's out of there. The tomb is still sealed, not the tomb, but the den is still sealed. They go to find him, and he's not there. He disappeared. All of those things are on the table because God can do anything he wants to, and nothing is difficult for him. But he doesn't choose to do that, does he? So I think what I want to ask you as a group, so start commenting, is what do we learn about God from this passage? And as you're commenting, let me just say this. Many of us have heard a lot of sermons on Daniel in the lion's den. And typically it takes a right turn at this point. And you hear something like this: God is in the den with you, whatever your lions are. Is your lion depression? God's there with you. He's closing the mouth. He's keeping that at bay. Is your lion sickness? God's right there. He's going to deliver you from that. Is your lion a job that you don't like? You need a new job? God's in the midst of that. And that's kind of the direction it goes. And everybody, yeah. Ooh, that feels good. God's right there with my lion. And shut the mouth of my lion, my metaphorical lion. But that has nothing to do with the text. Nothing. And what it does, unfortunately, is it leaves us like revved up and then very empty, because then we go out into the real world and we're like, God, where are you? Actually, I just lost my job. God, where are you? I still have depression. God, where are you? I'm sick and I need healing. And I feel like you're far, far away at this moment. What's going on here? So we want to be careful that we interpret Bible passages as they are supposed to be interpreted. This is a historical narrative passage. It is telling a story. That is the purpose of the passage. Sure, we can extract things, like I'm just saying, what can we learn about God out of this passage? But this is not ready for a big word? Ready? Buckle your seatbelt. Didactic or teaching passage. It's not like the book of Romans. It's not like the book of Ephesians. It's not teaching us a certain principle. It's just telling a story where we sit back and we make observations. And then we say, wow, look what I learned about God through this. All right. Let's see here. Susie says, I'm guilty. Okay, that's in response, I know, to what I was talking about earlier. Susie, me too. So guilty. This way was bigger. Somebody says, to stand with the lions is much more powerful than escaping them. God's work is exponential. Oh, I don't know who you are because it doesn't show here, but okay. Wow. Let me read that again. To stand with the lions is much more powerful than escaping them. God's work is exponential. That is so incredibly insightful that God didn't take him out of the den. He left him in there with the lions, but he protected him from the lions. Awesome, awesome commentary there. Somebody says we're learning about God, that God can do anything. He wants to show who he is to the unsaved people in order to change their hearts. It's excellent. Susie, God is a savior in many ways, but his great and mighty works will always prove it was him and nobody else. Oh, really, really good comments here. What we don't want to do in passages that are historical narrative, and I'm saying this because I've heard pastors say things like this, is say, where am I in this passage? You're not in it. It's historical narrative and you weren't there. So that's not a good question to ask. But you can always ask the question, where is God in this? What is God doing in this? And what can I glean from what I am observing God do in this passage? Always good questions to ask. Somebody else says, God does not necessarily take us around a trial, but often through them, as he promised to be with us in them. I love that. If we don't take anything else away here, let's take this away. That God is with us, even in the midst of the trials. And listen, Daniel didn't know what was going to happen when they threw him into that lion's den. I think we often forget that, like, because we're so far on the other side. Like, it's almost like, well, of course Daniel knew that he was going to be saved. I mean, he didn't know. For all he knew, he was going to be utterly ripped limb from limb by lions as a means of execution, which is utterly terrifying. I can't even imagine facing that. So he didn't know. But what he did know was that God is worth it. God is worth suffering for. God is worth dying for. He didn't even have to go there. He could have just gone off to the side of the window, faced Jerusalem in a corner where nobody could see him, put a blanket over himself, and pray like that, and nobody would have been able to see. Daniel says, no. God is actually worth suffering for. He's worth dying for, and he will be with me to the end, no matter what. Boy, you guys are on fire tonight. You're doing great. Let's see if we can finish this thing up. Daniel 6:23 and 24. Then the king was exceedingly glad. Don't you love how understated the Bible was? Okay, he had to be utterly beside himself. This guy just got thrown into the lion's den and he's still alive because an angel of God shut the mouth. This is unreal. This is just like, am I pinch myself? Am I dreaming or is this for real? It says, and commanded that Daniel be taken up. I told you, they drop him down out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Do you remember when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fiery furnace and they're all sniffing them like, wow, there's not even the smell of smoke. There's not a scratch on Daniel. There's not even like a little like happy, like it's a friendly bite. Like your cat will do sometimes, like, I'm going to bite you, but not enough for you to put me outside. Nothing like that. Verse 24, and the king commanded, oh, this word gets good. And those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. Now it gets sad. They, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all of their bones in pieces. Okay, this seems harsh, right? Really harsh, actually. There was a law. The Medes and the Persians just had this really weird, like, book of laws, okay? So not only can they not overturn their own laws, but listen to this one from history. On account of the guilt of one, all his kindred must perish. So if you're found guilty, your whole family gets wiped out. Your wife, your kids, probably your parents, everybody, your whole line gone. Now, this was strictly prohibited by God for Israel. Let me put this up here. Deuteronomy 24:16. So this is way back a long time before Daniel. Through Moses, God said, fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. In other words, if you do something wrong, you may be put to death, but we are not taking out your entire family. That we are not doing. But here's why the Medes and the Persians did that, and it kind of makes some sense, even though it's horrible to think about. And that is, if something went really wrong, like say the king orders these guys to all be thrown to the lions, and he leaves behind the wives, the children, whoever in the family, At a given point, the family members may take it on themselves to retaliate against the king. You killed my dad. I'm going to kill you. And so in order to make sure that that never, ever was a problem, they just wiped out the entire family line. Then there's nobody to retaliate. So that was their thinking. It's still absolutely awful to think about, but definitely our actions have ramifications beyond just us, but for other people in our lives. And that's just a small example. Let's read 6:25 to 28. Then Darius wrote to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. By the way, not the whole globe. I mean, they didn't have jurisdiction over every single place in the entire world. Every time you read this in Daniel, like the whole world, the whole nations, all the earth, it's talking about the Middle East because that's all they knew. Okay, just as an aside. So this is what he writes to all the peoples. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That verse makes it sound like two different people. So again, we're not sure. This is fantastic. After all of this, who is on display? Is it Daniel? Oh, Daniel's so amazing. This guy's like the lion whisperer, like the lions just do what he said. No, who's on display? It's God. And I'll tell you what, when we commit to doing the Daniel thing, like not just obedience, again, not minimizing obedience, but when we take it a step further than obedience to say, all right, God, what areas of my life am I just simply compromising in? Maybe I'm not being flat out disobedient, but I'm not doing what I ought to do. When we take it to that step, when we are known as people who cannot be bought, who cannot be bribed, who will always do the right thing, does your place of employment trust you? Have you ever lied to your boss or your coworkers? Ooh, I'm getting personal now. Because you know what? As believers in Jesus, it should take some time, but our places of employment should trust us as followers of Christ way more than they trust anybody else. And these are the words that they should say. That girl or that man has never lied to me. Even when it cost them, even when it would have been advantageous to do so, even when everybody else I know would have just kind of massaged the truth a little, maybe not an outright lie, but they would have fudged a little bit here and there. That employee has never done it, even when it's been costly to them personally. They've always told me the truth. They've always done what they said they would do, and they have never harmed me. Who gets the glory for that? It should be God, right? And I'll tell you what, if we are forthcoming in the fact that we are devoted followers of Jesus Christ. By the way, I don't tell people ever I'm a Christian. I don't like that term because in a lot of people's minds, all that means is I'm not Hindu, I'm not an atheist, I don't know, I'm not whatever. I'm not these other things, not a Buddhist. I'm a Christian. It doesn't mean anything to them. You know what I tell them? I say, I am a devoted follower of Jesus Christ. Those are harder words to get out. And that's like drawing the line in the sand. And when you do say that, then you have to live up to what you just put out there. But when you do, when they connect a holy life with the God that you serve, God is the one who is glorified through that. He just is. Well, I can't believe we got through chapter 6. Now, okay, wait. Let me take that off before I do that. I thought I had another banner, but I don't. Okay, let me just say this. Next week, please pray for me. Next week, chapter 7, we start the apocalyptic prophetic portion. That's a lot of P's in Daniel, which if you're like, I don't know what that means, but it sounds horrible. No, it's not horrible. It's actually extremely interesting. What Daniel is going to have happen is God is going to give him revelation of things that, hold on, have still to this day in 2021 not occurred yet. Things that are still coming down the pike. And what we are not going to do, I'll just put this out there, is something I didn't coin this term, but I love this term, newspaper eschatology. That's when you look at the newspaper, whatever website, and you see everything going on in the world and you go, oh, I know. This is this. And you're always, oh, here it is. Here's the Antichrist. Oh, here's the mark of the beast. It's what. Okay. We don't want to do that. But we also don't want to be like, oh, for heaven's sake, it's such a far way off. Nothing's going on. Everybody calm down. We're not in the end time. Okay. We want to hit somewhere in the middle, or we can honestly look at things going on around us and go, isn't that interesting? Here's what the Bible says. Here's what we're observing right now. Could it be that these things are going together? Maybe, and maybe not. Until someday we'll be like, okay, no more maybe not. That is definitely where we are. And at that point, then we have a whole new ball of wax going on. So we are going to try to be as rational and calm about this as we possibly can. We are also going to, rather than tell you as fact things that we don't know as fact, we're going to give you a couple of reasonable options for certain events that are still to come. There is mystery surrounding a lot of this stuff on purpose. God does this on purpose. Some of it is sealed up until the end times. We're not going to know exactly what's going on until it happens. And then it's like the light bulb will go on for those who are still there going, oh, that's that. Oh, didn't see that one coming. Now it makes sense. That's going to happen. So we don't want to be really, really, really dogmatic on things that we're not totally sure about. But I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll say it again next week. What we do not want for you, I feel like I have this responsibility to you, my Bible study hubbers that I dearly, dearly love. I don't ever want you to be blindsided. So if it's like, well, here's a really good option and here's a different, but also really good option, I'm going to give you both options so that if by chance one of those things happens, you're not like blindsided, like, getting hit by the stop sign in a big hurricane that you see happen to unfortunate newscasters from time to time. I don't want that to happen to you, spiritually speaking. I want you to be like, oh, okay, I knew I didn't think that was the one, or hoping that wasn't the one or whatever, but I knew that was an option. So we're going to present to you a few different options, and then we're just going to let you just internalize those things, and then you can make up your own mind, or you can be like me and Noelle and say, actually, I still don't know, but I do know what I can be looking for. So that's going to start next Monday night. And like I said, I'm not just saying it, I really would ask you to keep Noelle and me in prayer as we prepare for this, because it is a vast subject and it's not one I've ever taught before. Hope you still come back for it. But I want to make sure that, as always, that we give you the truth of the Word of God, and that we do so in a way that is just grace-filled and life-giving. Now, there it is. All right. The next one that I actually remembered to, make a banner for is this coming Thursday, September 2nd, I believe is the date. We kick off our doctrine/theology series here on Bible Study Hub. If you're on here right now, you already know how to get onto it, because it's the same thing. If you're on Facebook, we're putting it on Facebook, just like tonight. If you're on YouTube, we're putting it on YouTube, just like tonight. I think it will also be running, hopefully, on my own church's social media platforms and maybe our website or something. I'm not sure. We'll work out all those details. So my husband, who is a pastor, Lee Wiggins, will be basically leading this. I think it's like a 10 or 12 week study. Either Noelle or I will be joining him. So it'll be kind of the back and forth thing again. This week it'll be me, because Noelle is flying back from Las Vegas that night, which is unfortunate because she knows more about this topic than I do, but I'm going to have her brief me on it. Anyway, this week will be the Bible. We study it every week, but how do we know it's true? What about the books that didn't make it in? Like, should they be in there? What if your Bible has extra books? Whose Bible is right? The one with more books or the one with less books? And didn't it get kind of corrupted over the years? And how do we know that it's not corrupted? How do we trust this thing? What is all that about? This is super, super important stuff. That's this Thursday night. We would love to have you join us. Hope that you will. If you can't, or you're like, it's too much, I just can't do it. Please don't feel guilty about that. That's okay. Or you can listen to it later or whatever. No guilt. You can do it or not. There's nothing to buy. There's no homework because that's how we roll at Bible Study Hub. I don't like purchasing stuff and I don't like homework. So there you go. You'll never have to do either of those things. All right. Well, I hope that that's been helpful tonight. Take those nuggets of gold with Daniel and how he handled his life. And let's say, Holy Spirit, do that good, hard, convicting work in my life. Let me not forget that. Bring me to the next level in my spiritual life. That would be awesome. We love you guys. It has been such a pleasure being with you. Thanks for hanging with me all night. And I will see you on Thursday if you can join us. And in the meantime, team, you go out there and you make great decisions. All right. Love you guys and see you next time. Bye-bye.